Tonight, tariffs on Mexico. The latest on the delicate negotiations to stop them from going into effect. Plus, crisis at the border. A record number of migrants arrested trying to make it into America, and the Trump administration's response. And how world leaders pause to mark D-Day here at home and abroad. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. New tariffs on Mexico could begin in just a few short days. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. The tariffs hit Mexican imports Monday, unless talks between the U.S. and Mexico can avert them.
It all boils down to the border. The U.S. wants Mexico to step up and take more action to slow down the flow of migrants there.
CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us with the latest. Ben, how are these negotiations going?
Well, Jenna, John, the president said earlier progress is being made, but just not nearly enough, which means tariffs are a go come Monday if a deal cannot be reached.
Who are you meeting with today?
Team from the State Department.
Are you meeting with
Mexico's foreign secretary ready for round two, this time at the State Department. They hope to put the brakes on President Trump's tariffs, which target the U.S.'s third largest trading partner.
Our goal is to see an outcome, which is that of the reduction of numbers of illegals crossing. We need more cooperation coming from Mexico. Clearly what we've seen is that Mexico has not done enough.
If they don't reach an understanding, tariffs on imports from Mexico would not only hit, they'd rise 5% each month, maxing out at 25% in October if migration continues at record levels.
We don't discuss the tariffs. The dialogue was focused on migration.
And the president doesn't plan to back down, despite pushback from lawmakers on both sides.
I'm afraid that it might endanger some American jobs.
It's not a way to deal with immigration.
President Trump blames congressional Democrats for refusing to cooperate on immigration reform. The president tweeted that if no agreement is reached, tariffs at the 5% level begin on Monday, adding that the higher the tariffs go, the higher the number of companies that will move back to the USA. Now, it's not a positive sign for a deal without key players at the table. Both Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo are on the road, but it appears Mexican officials are ready to deal. We are hearing reports they have pledged to deploy 6,000 National Guard troops to the country's border region with Guatemala. The proposed deal would also give the U.S. authority to deport asylum seekers from Honduras and El Salvador to Guatemala. But John and Jenna, the big question is, will that be enough for President Trump to not move forward with these tariffs?
Thanks, Ben. That is the question indeed. Well, the problem behind the president's tariff threat isn't getting better. In fact, the latest numbers show it's growing progressively worse.
CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us with what is happening at the border. Eric?
Jenna and John, listen to this. The month of May saw more illegal immigrants pouring into the United States than agents had seen in a decade. According to the Department of Homeland Security, nearly 133,000 illegal immigrants crossed the U.S.-Mexican border in May, a 34% spike over the previous month.
We come from Honduras all together because life there is very critical. Life is very hard in Honduras.
Many of the migrants travel through Mexico hoping for a better life in the United States. The increase comes despite apparent efforts by Mexico to get a handle on the problem. Just Wednesday, some 200 military police, immigration agents, and federal police blocked the advance of about 1,000 Central American migrants walking north along a southern highway in Mexico. The scene got aggressive at times. In recent months, Mexico has used raids and roadside checkpoints to discourage these marches toward the U.S. Back in March, President Trump went after the source, moving to cut U.S. aid to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, or the Northern Triangle.
On migration issues, I would like to mention that it is one of the issues that has constantly worried us.
The president says he needs action, but Democrats put the blame on the focus for a border wall that they say is costly and ineffective. And word that troops will be deploying to paint part of the wall has sent tempers flaring. Senator Dick Durbin calling it in a tweet, quote, "a disgraceful use of taxpayer money. Our military has more important work to do than making Trump's wall beautiful." One noteworthy fact, the number of unaccompanied minors in May increased by more than 2,500. The White House warning that Health and Human Services, which cares for those minors, will soon be overwhelmed.
Eric, speaking of that, didn't the White House ask Congress for more money to help out border officials?
Yeah, John, they sure did. The Trump administration asked for $4.5 billion for humanitarian assistance, border operations, and mission support. It's important to note that none of that would go toward the border wall.
All right, Eric, thank you. Well, President Trump in France today to mark the 75th anniversary of D-Day, held a bilateral meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. One subject on the table, Iran. Trump using the time to downplay differences the two countries have on how to handle the Iranian nuclear program.
I don't think that the president wants to see nuclear weapons, and neither do I, and that's what it's all about. He doesn't want to see them having nuclear weapons, and I don't want to see them having nuclear weapons, and they won't have nuclear weapons. With that being said, let's see what happens with Iran. But when I became president, it's hard to believe, 2.5 years ago, now more, Iran was a true state of terror. They still are, but they were undisputed champions of terror, and that's a bad thing.
And Macron outlined France's 4 main objectives for how to handle Iran. First, keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, reduce ballistic activity, contain regional activity, and finally promote peace in the region.
So we have to deliver together these 4 objectives. This is the point. This is the point, and all the other debates are about technicalities. In order to build that, you need to start a negotiation, and I think the words pronounced by President Trump is that they are very important. We need to open a new negotiation in order to build and to get these 4 objectives.
And although President Trump removed the U.S. from the Iran nuclear deal, France and most of Europe, along with China, have all stayed.
Well, turning to the 2020 presidential election, former Vice President Joe Biden is polling ahead of President Trump in Texas, a typically red state. A new Quinnipiac University poll shows Biden leading the president by 4 points among Texas voters, 48% to Trump's 44%. If you look at the demographics, the president has 60% of the white vote, but Biden gets 86% of black voters and nearly 60% of Hispanics. Right now, Biden is the only Democratic candidate who polls ahead of the president in Texas. Well, when it comes to the debate over abortion, a growing number of Americans say it will impact how they vote come 2020. 3 in 10 say they would only vote for a candidate who shares their same view on abortion. According to new statistics from CNN, that's the highest rate seen since they started conducting the poll back in 1996. The poll finds 33% of women voters see abortion as a critical issue.
And joining us now, A.B. Stoddard with Real Clear Politics and David Brody, CBN's chief political analyst. Both of you, thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys.
A.B., let's start with you. You know, abortion clearly going to be a big issue in 2020. But if you look at the Democratic presidential candidates, none of them are really pro-life. How do you see this playing out for them?
Well, right. Everyone running in the primary campaign are running as pro-choice Democrats, but they differ in their views, and that's why they're very critical of the front runner right now, former Vice President Joe Biden, because he has come out in opposition to federal funding for abortion. This long time label we've heard called the Hyde Amendment, which the viewers don't need to worry about what that means, but that it's a position he's always held. He's a devout Catholic. He believes that he can be for a woman's right to choose, but not for federal funding, that's where the majority of the country is. If you look at his general election prospects, were he to be the nominee, of course, that would be a good position to take. But he's going to get hammered in the primary by people who are trying to get to the left of him on almost every issue, from trade to really everything. And so this is an issue for them to differentiate themselves on. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot about it in the upcoming debates, fundraising letters, interviews, this type of thing, as they try to soften his support.
David, on this topic, or a little bit related to this topic, the Trump administration announced that it is going to strip funding of federal funds for the fetal tissue research at the
NIH, a huge victory for the pro-life community, yet you have doctors and scientists saying that this will hurt their ability to treat diseases.
Right, and that's been the argument all along, kind of on both sides. But once again, another notch in the pro-life belt for the pro-life community. They call this president the most pro-life president ever. He has delivered really ever since day one, and he better keep on delivering, because he's going to need every one of that 81% of that white conservative evangelical vote that he got in 2016. If he goes south, and we've talked about this, but if he goes south of that number, then he's in trouble. He'll probably end up losing re-election. So these type of little things matter to a degree, but more importantly, just kind of like in a global stand. Did I say global and Trump in the same sentence? But you know what I'm trying to say.
Plays in a larger role.
That's right. I don't think he would want me to say that.
Well, on the issue of impeachment, today Nancy Pelosi made some news when she said she would like to see the president not impeached, but in prison. AB, those sound like fighting words.
Right. Well, we all know that the speaker is under increasing pressure, not only from the members of her caucus, who now I think it's over 60 of them, and that is not a critical mass for impeachment, but it's a loud one, and it's growing, who support beginning impeachment proceedings, if not head to eventually an impeachment vote in the House. And then, of course, there's just around the country grassroots energy heading in the same direction that she feels pressure from. But she's been very insistent all along that she is going to be really slow on this, and that she won't bring it unless they can make really an airtight case that would sort of shame the senators in the Republican Party, who would then be forced to vote to acquit should the House proceed with an impeachment vote. But she's really struggling. There are meetings every single day on this topic. And so in a meeting, she decided to say something drastic like that. We don't know if it's intentionally leaked or it just happened to be shared with the media afterwards. But it's sort of a pattern we see where she ups her rhetoric and sharpens the edge when faced with sort of an accusation that she's being weak in the face of this pressure. So I expect more of this to come. But I do think that Nancy Pelosi is not willing to budge on this issue for the time being.
And it makes sense politically if you think about it. I mean, what's the end game here exactly? Okay, let's go down the road. The president's now impeached. Let's say the numbers are there. And as to A.B.'s point, I'm not even sure if the numbers are there, obviously, at this point. But let's say they are. So he's impeached. Then what? Not going to be convicted in the Senate. So you're left with impeachment with probably public opinion not for impeachment. And now you're in the 2020 election, and you got all sorts of political problems. So that's why Nancy Pelosi, I think, stays true and doesn't budge.
David, AB, while overseas on his trip, President Trump took a swipe at some of his political opponents, Bob Mueller and Nancy Pelosi. He also called her Nervous Nancy, which up until this point is interesting because he's withheld giving her a nickname up until now. It seems like we've hit a point of no return in this relationship.
I will give the speaker credit that when she was given the chance in Normandy to criticize the president, she said, I'm not going to talk about the president when I'm overseas. So I think that was interesting restraint on her part. And I do think he's called her crazy recently, so today it's Nervous. I don't think it was appropriate for him to, I mean, he actually made stuff up about Bob Mueller that isn't true in his interview right there in front of all the graves at Normandy. It was definitely something that will alarm many Democrats, the same ones who are pushing for impeachment. But there's no question that he is in a fighting posture now with the Democratic leadership in the House. He doesn't, after the infrastructure negotiations blew up, seem to be pursuing any kind of bipartisan agenda items with them on prescription drugs or anything. And I think it's sort of all-out war over the question of what they're going to do with the investigations.
Yeah, and by the way, bad decision of the day. I mean, Donald Trump, first of all, bashing your political opponent overseas, which is kind of a presidential no-no to begin with. Okay, he's unconventional, but then to put the backdrop of World War II soldiers' graves behind him on D-Day, no less. I mean, who is responsible for that? A bad decision of the day.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. A.B. Stoddard, David Brody, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, guys.
Well, 75 years since soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. How both President Trump and his French counterpart marked the anniversary of D-Day. Well, welcome back. Tonight, the world is remembering D-Day. 75 years ago, American and Allied forces stormed the beaches at Normandy, laying the foundation for their victory in World War II.
The president and vice president marked the largest seaborne invasion in history today. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now with that story. Abigail?
Well, today the president, along with French President Macron, paid tribute to the men who took the Normandy beaches on D-Day. A French and American ceremony honoring the Allied troops featured 60 surviving veterans now in their 90s. President Trump honored those men.
They battled not for control and domination, but for liberty, democracy, and self-rule. They pressed on for love and home and country, the main streets, the schoolyards, the churches, and neighbors, the families and communities that gave us men such as these. They were sustained by the confidence that America can do anything, because we are a noble nation with a virtuous people praying to a righteous God. The exceptional might came from a truly exceptional spirit. The abundance of courage came from an abundance of faith. The great deeds of an army came from the great depths of their love.
Before the ceremony, President Trump and the First Lady visited the French cemetery, where more than 9,000 troops are buried. He now heads to Ireland to conclude his European trip. With President Trump on the beaches of Normandy, the Vice President traveled to the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. The little town of Bedford made the ultimate sacrifice in the invasion that drove out the Nazis, eventually ending the war in Europe.
On D-Day, 20 Bedford boys with the 116th Infantry stormed Omaha Beach and fell in the defense of freedom. That such a small town would make such a sacrifice seems almost beyond belief. Theirs was a story of one small American town that went to war and died on Omaha Beach.
The Vice President said those men were hometown folk who became national heroes. He said they will forever be remembered in history as the Bedford Boys.
So God bless the Bedford Boys and all the 9,388 Americans who lie in that quiet field overlooking the beaches they took 75 years ago today.
Pence says the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford was constructed to honor all those who gave, quote, the last full measure of devotion on the longest day. John, Jenna?
All right, Abby, thank you very much. Well, coming up, prayer and the role it played in D-Day. How some are hoping to memorialize that here in the nation's capital. Well, following those inspirational ceremonies at Normandy today, another gathering took place at the World War II Memorial on the National Mall.
As Paul Strand reports, there's a move to make a famous prayer a more permanent part of future remembrances there.
Troops past and present and members of a grateful nation gathered here at the World War II Memorial to remember that June 6th turning point in the global conflict.
160,000 troops landed, and within a couple weeks over 1 million landed, and within a couple months they liberated Paris, and within 11 months they had Hitler bottled up there in Berlin.
President Roosevelt frequently talked to the nation during his fireside chats, but during D-Day he didn't talk, he prayed for those in the fierce fight.
Some will never return. Embrace these, Father, and receive them, thy heroic servants, into thy kingdom.
President Trump invoked FDR's prayer as he marked the 75th anniversary Wednesday in Portsmouth, England. Here in Washington, Ohio Senator Rob Portman is among many Americans who want to see that prayer placed permanently here at this memorial.
It is a huge part of American history, in my view. On this incredibly important day, a president of the United States chose to invoke the Almighty. He chose to use prayer rather than a speech to inspire the country, to provide protection for these troops.
Chris Long of the Christian Alliance of America points out there's no mention of God at the memorial.
The World War II Memorial is unique in that way. It's one of the memorials that does not have a scripture verse, a prayer, or reference to God anywhere on it. So the idea legislatively 7 years ago was to add FDR's D-Day prayer in its entirety here at the memorial.
You go to Normandy, what do you see? Crosses, 9,000 of them, and Stars of David. These were men and women of faith. And so it's only proper that there should be some acknowledgement of faith at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Long said of FDR.
He actually hand-wrote the prayer, and it's estimated that 100 million people worldwide heard that prayer that morning.
Some may question adding the prayer to this memorial, but it would always remind the nation that at that destiny-changing moment, America knew it had to rely on more than men and military might. It had to rely on God. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the World War II Memorial.
Coming up, how chaplains are working to help bring healing in the aftermath of the Virginia Beach shooting.
If you're over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days, I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. A free book to help you maximize your retirement income from television host and three-time author Josh Melberg has been released. This book reveals little-known truths about annuity strategies in simple-to-understand terms. Grab a pen right now because we are about to offer you this free book that unlocks the 5 little-known secrets we believe baby boomers and seniors should know before buying an annuity.
Call 800-793-9072 now.
And you'll receive a free copy of Josh Melberg's book, Next Gen Annuity Strategies Revealed. As a bonus, we'll also send you the #1 mistakes retirees are making with their investments today, and a free DVD on how you can get up to 33% more income in retirement.
Call 800-793-9072
to have your free information kit rush to your door.
Again, that's 800-793-9072.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Over the years, we've helped thousands of families find senior care, and today's senior living communities have never been better. With amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And nobody understands your options like the advisors at A Place for Mom. These are local expert advisors that will partner with you to find the perfect place and determine the right level of care, whether that's just a helping hand or full-time memory care. Best of all, it's a free service. Call today, A Place for Mom. You know your family, we know senior living. Together, we'll make the right choice.
Call A Place for Mom right now to get our free ebook on financing senior care, as well as a free referral for senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-211-0452. That's 1-800-211-0452.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Well, the memorial site of the 12 victims of the deadly massacre in Virginia Beach, Virginia, last Friday has become a big gathering spot for those who want to grieve and pay their respects.
That's right. Chaplains with the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team have been there for all week to offer prayer for those who need it.
And chaplain coordinator Bob Poff told CBN News he had a special moment after a local pastor encouraged everyone to pick a victim's family to pray for.
I picked a gentleman who was the contractor because my father was a contractor. And Sunday afternoon, I met his granddaughter. Yesterday, I was able to meet his family, parents and wife and son. And that was very moving for me to be able to think that's who I'm praying for. And then I was able to pray with them in person.
Well, for Virginia Beach Remembers, a 2-hour service honoring the victims and their families will be held at the Rock Church in Virginia Beach tonight. You can watch that service on the CBN News channel beginning at 7:30 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, it's going to be very moving, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, that does it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.